Oh, that is that's okay. Just not helpful. Different. No. It's okay. They're not coming. No problem. That is this one. Oh, that is.
Like I should check what gap you do again.
Oh.
I get there.
Oh, that's it. That is that's okay. Oh, lots. Oh, Kangala Tashi Dele. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody.
Oh, yeah. Sanje choda
Soki chonam lo janji pada dagi gapsuchi dagi chongi pe tokam din rolam banje sange grupa so
Sanje choda
chodan soki chonam lo janji pada dagi gapsuchi dagi chongi pe tokam din rolam banje sange grupa so
Sanje choda
chodan soki chonam lo janji pada dagi gapsuchi dagi chongi pe tokam din rolam banje sange grupa so
Tayata
Gate, para sum gate, body,
Tayata
gate, para sum gate,
body so Tayata
gate, para sum gate,
so Ola so that's some tamjaga to topjalana machiba sanje kumar moja chine ya tobaja and it did and janju sembe labjan the sushi the nyamso langi laole shingo shimbo tubo tole tujisho mano ajiko and it comes about that kasura comes about the Dakaji Kasa Chimboshi Seve and the Juju within the Geshe to be years ago. What is Tabata Olaso?
And so we set our motivation to do whatever we possibly can to attain the fearless state of enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings, knowing that to attain that state, I must perfect all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To train perfectly in them, I must know what they are. To gain that knowledge, I must educate myself based on an unmistaken text and unmistaken presentation. That's why I'm here this morning to listen to teaching from the king, one of the king of mind training texts, the Bodhisattva's way of life.
What is it? Antari that Namjun and she channel. And that Casota Takajaji Rangi Tungi Nankana Tak Kajaji Tapjala Tujim Japan, Lamashaja Singi set up. And Lamashaja Singi Gan Chiwo Jamba Tuga Hula West part of Mebatone, Shinranjana Yeshiva Onla the Jaba Janta, and Yeshibana and Lamashaja Singi Naba Janta and Tim, and the Casota. One on Chulama Novelin and Mijiba would get the what did you say?
So we begin by setting up the visualization in the space in front of us. So the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, who in essence is our own root guru. The figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, greatly compassionate, skilled in means, one face, two hands, the right hand in the earth-touching mudra, the left hand in the meditative equipoise gesture, holding an alms bowl filled with nectar. He is marked by the three syllables Om at the crown, A at the throat, and Hung at the heart center. From that Hung at the center, the heart center, light rays emanate going out into the pure realms, inviting the wisdom beings and empowering deities from their natural abodes. The wisdom beings dissolve into the central figure. The empowering deities confer the nectar of empowerment, some of which then overflows at the crown, producing the figure of Akshobhya.
And the rank Tago do run a tinchebe, and it's because of the that's it, the permanent chebe, and it's George Juba, Simja Tancha, Masawa Meva years, so the Kumacha.
We visualize in the space all around us all kind mother sentient beings, beginning with our parents, those who are close to us, until we include all the denizens of the 6 realms of cyclic existence. They are all there without exception.
what the any dinner rang dinner said the lama to be on the Casada, Dutch Marazutunda, two get Marazutunda, Marazu no Mombas of Sanji, the Kanjaji to beg you identity. And it said them any batching, tell me, Tava, Hishigiteva, Muntugiteva. What did you tap but said, don't you what is some?
Then when we bring our attention to figure the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha in the space in front, we are overwhelmed by this sense of appreciation that the Buddha, for our sake, generated the mind of enlightenment, for our sake, trained on the path, and for our sake, ultimately attained the full and complete state of enlightenment. And so, from that point of view, in contemplating the wonderful qualities of the Buddha, the wonderful qualities of enlightenment, we develop that pure faith, that manifest faith, and that faith of conviction.
And the Ranga Tago to a Simja that Tamjaga, and the Chicken Kasoda, reduce the Dungan Nashima Kai, but a number of minutes in Namjake, and Chikaso. The chicken don't make Kusun to you and the trash, Manata, what is the
And likewise, that are all of the kind mother sentient beings around us, as we have said, are within the 6 realms of cyclic existence, yet they're able to cognize this scene with a human intelligence. And so they are also looking with that sense of faith and appreciation towards the essential figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, with that triple faith also.
And the Kawala Mibeta, Tomashaja to Bella, you had detention, Tomashabuja to Bella Mibeta, Chicaso there, you had detention at Devatan, and Ticasoleta, Rangatana Magasim Jetta Tamjagan, to end national tenor and Mississippi Ninja, and that to make you that Chimora, Chawa Chucha, Chawa Short. And Jawana, Lama to be chinking up to whether the water they were good at the machine, Chimor, Temba Chuch, Temba Short, Temba Targeting the Teda Genovan, Lama Shajas and because of the chinking up to source. And what in the Santaka judging, what in the Kumbashi?
Through that appreciation of the qualities of an enlightened being, we were focusing on that sort of virtue. Then we become aware, of course, of the various sufferings that all the beings in the 6 realms of cyclic existence are undergoing. Brings forth this sense of compassion. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May that be the case. I will see to it that it is the case. So, Guru Buddha, please bless me to be able to do this. Likewise, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had happiness and the cause of happiness. And may that be the case. I will see that it is the case. Please, Guru Devi, please bless me to make this so.
Simja Dada Tamjaki, and to make you the Chiva Deva Tamja Tamata, so the Chigi is a Chiga to do that. Simja Tamja, Simja Chiga, Deva Tamja Deva Tamja Deva Chama, but simple. That did the gentleman knew what the Sula Dosna, Tuna said of a Simja to Tuja, Lamla, Momas, or Sanji, or Kolato. That Pongi combat in Matuna Tamada to a Chigi, something what a little combat.
And you know, when we think about it, we have this tremendous determination and enthusiasm to go about this business of relieving all sentient beings of suffering and its causes, placing all sentient beings in happiness and its causes. But it's all too obvious to us that we are unskilled and we cannot do this for even one sentient being at the moment. But we know that the figure of the Buddha, the state of enlightenment, that the Buddha has gone through that training process of generating that mind of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, so completely focused on the welfare of sentient beings from the training process, and likewise in attaining the state of complete and full enlightenment as it is solely focused on the benefit of sentient beings. So it is the Buddha's state of enlightenment that has that expertise to be able to work perfectly for the state to relieve sentient beings suffering and place them into every happiness. And therefore, I rededicate myself to attaining that state of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And it's kind of maintaining that focus and meditation on the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha in front of us that we make such a pledge.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no, okay. No, okay.
Change it, okay.
No, coming. Go to board open, no, go to problem. Okay.
Only this one.
No.
Okay.
So sure I get it.
Please wait for a moment.
People committed.
Oh. You can turn off that.
Just forget of continuous.
Ah.
How to? Not sure. Oh. Oh, yeah. Oh, 大家不错。可是呢，这个开始就吧，对，结果就，对呀，我大家不错。그냥 거기도.
거기도 again.
도착. 다 much better. 올랐어. 투자 약보도 투자 마시나 약간해도.
Yeah, you have to understand your machine. If you don't understand your machine well, then yeah, big problem.
Yeah, 도착. 뭐야? 아니 가서 잠들 거 봐봐.
Die Sokran Gyatang Jume Du.
올랐어.
Wogi Chikdi.
누가 셔럽스. 올랐어. 그래. 어디라? 다 간제 지금 간제 지금 가서 아니 지금 디과 쌓아야 돼. 아니 지금 셈 마디베 온게 용되게 요래. 아니 개와서야 돼. 셈 디베 온게 용되도 다 간제 지금 니자 셈그 누발할 때는 용되게 도. 셈그 누발할 때는 용되게 도. 근데 이번 인상 다 간제 지금 간제게 아니 셈 아니 지금 미개에 초대 숙충도다는 매바소이다 아니 셈게 연den게 차대 아니 뭐 전전에 디 마게바 개바자 아니 개바데 권에 권도 패고 있다 최제스 랭겐도 되려도 와
And so we have been looking at really the paramount importance of the mind, and in that it's been demonstrated that negativities arise from an uncontrolled, undisciplined mind. Virtues can come from a mind more disciplined. And so it's all related to the state of mind, and that whether we have want to kind of when the whole point of our responsibility around adopting a spiritual practice is in order to prevent or reduce the negative elements of our mind and to increase the good qualities of that same mind.
Yeah, what is it? That the name was a takazinde sem yomobe cholachana and kari and it's a mutable to look at the young but because Geshe Jongso that then and give it similar down let than the conditions of what I can do that can just Jimbado children the Sobata that can just that can just anything that's the sheriff to get there and it's similar than a young yours that the name was that was same and to Kasude that can just give it chola soon your check. 계획초 관에 공도 배열하다 배준체 미계의 초지 아니 여바디 숙충의 매바 소열다 배준체다 딜레시벨 내가 심바지 민도가 내가 심바시 믿는 거다 디니니라 티라 도나 맞제 받잖아 아니 개와 두고요 동에 가서데 세와 지구였으나 다 문에 거라 두고 매바다 두고 매바다 제시 맞자 경우요 봐 어떻게
And so that we have been looking really in the last few days at the influence of the kind of propensities of mental affliction that will lead to negativities arising from an undisciplined mind state, and how all of the perfections, be it coming from generosity, ethics, patience, enthusiastic effort, even concentration or mind, that all of the success or not rely on the state of our mind and what we bring to it, that discipline of mind, the control of the mind. And so all the virtues that arise from those perfections as well, they're totally reliant on our mind. And so it's kind of like we are bound to really promote that whole side of virtue, to allow for that to blossom and to flourish, kind of like whatever basis of virtue, virtuous tendencies that we have, to increase more and more, to cultivate that side of our mind. And conversely, when we look on the debilitating effect of negativity, that we want to distance our mind states from those negative traits and negative states of mind. And we really, when it comes down to it, when we talk about spiritual practice, there is no greater priority than this, really. And so we have been looking at the 6 perfections in relation to the mind, and now it's the turn of the wisdom, the 6th, how it also relies on the mind. And verse number 17 states, even those who wish to find happiness and overcome misery will wander with no aim or meaning if they do not comprehend the secret of the mind, the paramount significance of Dharma.
And dewa top dewa ina ya dewa towa doda dunga shom dewa ina ya and deda debe dönde da drum madu ba chene ane kasada da kajo ko ane chik kasada da kajo ko la chamle da ne digres ane gyawa je duba ina ya ane koe digi zige gyuzammedo tuktu yo mare ko ane 타에게 da kajo da gyue dunga da gyue dunga 그 잠면도 gyue dunga da dende 잠면도 tuktu yo mare 타마 dunga 걸 규定했지 예 가서나 최근 내로 타도 상와短담배 때봐 최탐적인 내로 타도도 마셔봐 이마이나 아니 대화 주바 이네 대화 친이 상와다 대화 가서 다 지가서래 탈치 맞지 다 줍두고 요 말았어. 좀 인자 아니 지금 코알 잡는 내디 그랬어. 되매 봤다. 문에 전에 전에다 돈다 매번에 시전배. 토스전에 원남이 그도 다 가자. 되게 대화 채는 저거 요때 대외 경문에도 뭐 맞죠 봐 인자. 안데 하되게 요랬어. 참 그거 소셔 참.
And so this verse relates to any kind of person who is an unsuitable receptacle, as it's put here, to be taught the ultimate nature of the Dharma. And this comes down to where it talks about the paramount significance, in sense here, is referring to the two truths, the conventional and ultimate truth. And it's saying here that somebody who's an unsuitable receptacle here, who receives a teaching on the ultimate truth, is in danger of misinterpreting what is being said. And so, particularly in understanding that something which does actually exist to be non-existent, and there fall into the extreme of nihilism. And on the other side, also unable to grasp the notion that phenomena can truly exist, can exist by merely being puted by thought, but they don't exist inherently even at the atomical level. So when they kind of fail to understand ultimate existence in this way, and then even though they wish to attain happiness and to overcome suffering and so on, they will not have any success. They will continue to wander, as it said, in cyclic existence, and that the virtue that they do accumulate will only serve to keep them in cyclic existence. So they cannot kind of access a fully qualified virtue, and that will lead to fully qualified happiness, definite happiness beyond the cyclic existence. And so they remain trapped from the peak of cyclic existence down to the hell without respite, because they have failed to access this the paramount significance of Dharma.
딱 제가 탄일에 저와 체다다 딱단일에 제네 아니 위는 네베다 그래서 딱다다 체다일에 제가 지금 제가 돈에 제가 임바티 다 뭐이네 저 딱다다 체다일에 제가 임바티 이바도 못 쳐고 요와 근데 임바 인사 네 마루와라 때마이나 체다를 호야다 최단자 란신의 마주오레 라바나 유전의 주바 마레스 마레스 라바이나 그 체달라 롱조나 아니 다간제 저거 아니 저 레균데 매바 겨왕간치 매바 다간제 저거 다간제 저 아니 가서도 다간제 렌데가 남샤도 좀 밑에봐 뭐다 되게 저도 아니 가서 다 체달라 롱다나 아니 저 겨와 자와니도 좀 두고 요 말이야 딜레 딱달라 롱나 야 그래 딱달라 롱아 연바이나 야 저 가서래 저 코알레 타와다 용거 말할 때 얘나야 denduga ten tobe ju mangbu cha sa tu gure ro chudim soye soba komye la soba daga ne chi ba ta ya la soba an daga je kyawang nga chi da de kele la soba den mangbu ju yong yo ani de yine ya di gewa de gewa de jangba ge ani taba top to ko la ta to yong ba le kasna ko damba to ba zin sa du an ko kowe ju la to de ge men do 탑에 줄어 주고 요 말이야. 요 말이야. 다디 된데 이거 인자 된도 타바지 저거 요나 안에 코에 자와 단지 말이 봐. 디니 뭐 담에 도베 셔럽 로유도 송아지 거기도 와. 다디 마시 봐도 안에 타바 용 두고 요 말이야. 용 두고 요 말이야. 어떤데 대 맞아 아니 기나 참스게 다루다 무시당 준줄라 속봐. 다가 내신 그 저거 가서 다지 감고매 연대 땡에질라 소바 근데 요바 임바 이나양 다 코에 줄을 치발이 코에 줄 디지 주주 줍두고 그러면도 코알레 탄에 탑에 주지 줍두고 요 말이야 다디 두발라 최기 상와 뭐 여기 내수 라싱가 마주바 덴바디 뭐 쳐고 그래 로이도 마숑아이나 뭐 쳐두고 말와 어때래
And so a little more on that in talking about the unsuitable receptacle for those who receive any teachings on the true nature of reality. They are in danger of falling into either of two extremes, the extreme of nihilism or the extreme of eternalism. And that, for example, when they hear the phrase that all phenomena lack any inherent existence, for those who interpret that to mean, oh, that means that nothing exists, then you have a fall into the extreme of nihilism, and that this is extremely, detrimental to the person who misunderstands in that way. And so that because they, don't therefore accept the law of cause and effect, that is kind of like a pointlessness about their approach thereafter. The extreme of eternalism is also a major drawback, but it is better than nihilism in that because you believe in inherent existence, of course, you're not going to attain liberation from cyclic existence, but there is a certain acceptance of the law of cause and effect. There's sort of a certain reasoning to practicing good ethics and generosity, etc. But it has to be understood that no matter what you do, you can kind of like move up the ladder in cyclic existence to the higher realms and so on. But you cannot get beyond cyclic existence. You cannot attain liberation from cyclic existence. That's only possible by being able to identify the key issue of the ignorance of a self-grasping entity and the wisdom realizing selflessness as the natural and direct antidote to that. So it's important that we, on the one hand, avoid, of course, the extremes, but also identify the key issue around the true nature of reality.
What did it? The name in was the Takanja Simgus Sawa, don't damn Demba Mebati, don't damn Red Up was a don't damn Dembati, don't damn Dembati. Dembati, the water yoris, the water yoris, or the Sungut water, the Mebayina, and Rangi, the water to go your there, and there were two banishing to Marista, the last time there was this.
So that's what this verse is saying here. That the secret of the Dharma is that we should really recognize the ultimate truth, and that this is so important. Otherwise, even though we might engage in virtue and experience some happiness, it's always going to be limited to our wandering within the bounds of cyclic existence.
Suma Samsung la Bevala Nietzsche, that Samsung la Bevala Nietzsche, daughter about the Gaba Sheva Nietzsche.
The door temper the tongue. The can I get first door
no Maria, door tempasna,
door two. So the third of the set of outlines here is the effort necessary to protect the mind. And this is first going to be dealt with briefly, and then with a more extensive explanation.
That door tempadella, Zawalias. Dede, Dagi, Semdenis, Dede, Dagi, Semdene, Lexon Lever Suacha, Samson Tusho Madoba, Tusho Mambo Chishicha.
So the first of these then is the brief explanation. This is verse number 18, which says, "This being so, I shall hold and guard my mind well. Without the discipline of guarding the mind, what use are many other disciplines?
어디래? 다 가자. 근데 임바 인사 다 가자 저기 가서 대기 유튜브 또 모두 쓰긴다. 되게 그건가? 자와 셈라라 레기 여자. 근데 좀세 대다 위에나 다 다게서 다 라게 셈되니 아니 다 가자 저기 그 셈되니 다 가자 잡아다 시신게 안베다 자라제네 레버 수네 남야 아니 가서다 냠바 메바 다 가자 저 ruwa kacha je kewe chole nyamba mebar legwa sungwa jadesa sungwa chekukudu chigi yinsa ta dende yinba yinsa ta soso ngune lenggen zowa de semde sung dewa le semde nyomo we chola jogu mudo jara dene ane rangi lunga yisungu jawa kande shewa yina ane kaso de ta kacha de kaso nyomo ge shewando jogu duwe nyomo la kapte chayo jogu nyomo mewa soye le 차지를 주고도 거두이네 잡아대 시신게 아니 가서도 dembe 다 시신게 주고도 잘했지 아니 잡아 갑도 나와들 많이 맞지고랬어 삼성에 두쇼 마도바 샘 자연도 당면서 두쇼시 다 샘데 가바도네 샘데 준답데 돈나 맞아자 샘 자연도 다 가바도네 더 주잖아 그래서 아니 칸도라 소바 망고시 찌자바 이나야 딱 칸도야다다 나장야다 가르쳐봐 이나 어디 가자 지금 다 dembe 페이지 잡 연구를마도 지금 빠지 가서다 샘 뒤에라 아니 요알 납치 못 줘야 돼 그때 용 말해서 dembe도 시작하고 참
So what this verse is really pointing out to, that if we're serious about happiness, we know that it depends on our mind state, and that it is as part of that process, it is like a responsibility for us to generate and maintain this mindfulness and alertness around protecting the mind or guarding the mind. And so here, that it's the simple process of really understanding what is going on internally. Is my mind focused more on negativity or virtue, and then consequently the doorway of the mind is leading to what's happening with the doorway of speech and the doorway of our body. And that's at all times that we are endeavoring to keep the checking process constant as to where exactly my attention is now. And this is borne out in this verse where it's really making a kind of a pledge to say, because of these reasons, then I will use mindfulness and alertness to really well protect the mind and to avoid any degeneration of that sort of strict attention that I'm paying to all of what's going on. And that so if I am negligent with regard to this, if I am not conscientious with regard to this, then even though I engage in virtues like saying prayers and so on, that apart from just the bare minimum virtue of reciting, I will not gain the full potential of virtue from any practice I engage in, because the mind is not fully there. So it's kind of saying, when you are that distracted and when you're negligent about employing mindfulness and alertness in all of our practice, that we are doing ourselves an injustice. So we have to keep this checking process up as something that is kind of natural to us.
가담 라마 속에 숨어요 봐. 가담 라마 속에 다 내가 실 게매 아니 저 가서도 동세지 캐체네 아니 셈라 따데디스 코팀나 나팀 콜르는 말을 숨어도 와. 어디나 시절로 어디나 시절 다 가자 내가 쪼데 돼 봐.
And so as the example Geshe is used to mention, that they say, I have really only one job to do. And that is, I keep the sphere of mindfulness on what's going on within. When it needs to, be employed, I employ it. when kind of negativities arise. When my mind is relaxed, I can relax. Otherwise, there's nothing extra particular that I need to be doing.
가서라 랑 포만 매번는 거라서 셈 생활도 좋어요. 셈 생활도 좋. 셈데 녀모배 생활도 좋네. 아니 다 가자 저 가서도 무트네다 돼 대화 되고 돼 미도에 동에도 무트는 용돼. 동에 직사게 저거 양 동에 직사게 저거 용. 나라서 지당 나라서 또 자가이면 무슨 미일류대 가서도 다 토리를 루된 이면서 또 동네 융화를 이나 양가서 동네 지금 저거 누가 와이 뭐도 좋아 먹고 땅 거죠 가짜 날때 용거를 가짜 날 용거 뭐좀 뭐 시하고 지기도 와 가르치는 지고 열었으나 라 세고 샤완도 셈 용모배 샤완도 조잖아 아니 레니 마사베는 모두는 다 깨다 쳐도 동네 모두는 용되기도 와
And so it's very plain to see that we are when we understand, we speak of the mind and what the mind is incapable of. So we're kind of like, since beginningless time, we are under the control of the mind, and the mind has been under the control of negativity, and that even though we have this great desire to experience pleasant experiences and happiness, and we want to at all costs avoid suffering, we seem to be inundated with suffering, going on suffering one after the other, and devoid of the happiness we so speak. And so it's kind of like, even though we have this human body, which is somewhat preferable to other realms of existence, but we can have such kind of like an inundation of these unpleasant, discomforting, undesirable experiences, suffering, that we're always going on like, why is it like this? Why like this for me? And so on. And that, constantly engaging in these negative karmas that, of course, lead to this chain of suffering coming one after the other.
동네스근데 썸마도라 때는 용구도 때는 샘도답라 제국도 다 샘도답 그래 제국도스나다 아니 지금 가서라다 제 가서 샘데 아니 지금 가서데 점바데 시신거 수네 아니 지금 가서 녀모 깨기도 해 깨기도나 건데스 깨기도 아니 랑게 냠는 것도 아니 아니 깨봐도 못 쳐봐지 깨봐도 혹가 녀모 깨어도 깨먹고 쳐는 것도 아니 삼로 땅땅 아니 지금 가서도 릉하게 아니 자와제당 망보 지금 좀어도 아니 시대 그 용어도 깨운 거예요 아니 건데스 깨기도 못 쳐봐도는 다디 가서도 다디 튕게 마상 왔어요 다들 내내전에 깨기도 다들 맞아 왔잖아 건데스는 깨기면도 되게 됐다 간자 저 랑게 냠뉴라 시베 토네 아니 슉슉 깨 가서 슉슉보다 충다다 충마데 매버 소답다 다 배주 제고도
And so that so yes, that we have to kind of understand that all of what's being talked about in this text is explaining, on the one hand, why it is that suffering arises, and pointing out that it arises from an uncontrolled, undisciplined mind. And therefore, we have to reach the conclusion that therefore I must gain control, must discipline my own mind. And that the process of doing this is to cultivate mindfulness and alertness. And so all of which is to maintain like a vigilance around what's going on mentally, so that we can more readily and quickly recognize the arising of mental affliction. We can understand that it is mental affliction that is arising, and that we have then the antidotes of the processes by which we can do something about that very, very early on. And that all it's all about gaining the experience necessary to reduce the influence of mental affliction on our lives and to become expert at it.
我的手的他搞这个sem家人都当然了，安尼的看到他搞这玩意那样，安尼告诉你把对东嘛的是嘞，是吧？他搞那个这个告诉他，在南巴街的居民目前的看到几个月的，安尼国门的多几个月的，几个月的，因那样他这当这个主要是全部的，全部现在贴图我们多啊，贴嘛的确认你把没了嘛的，俺那是其他这单个要嘛的吧。 그래 말아도 뒤주 어스만 규리 뭐 지고 여대 얘나야 뒤주 규리 뭐 제발 난생게 안에 소소가 셈 뒤답라 지금 가서 셈 뒤답데 안에 딱다지 조마도 바탕 야나 지 가서데 제셰가 딱다 숨마도 셈 자연도 치 안에 뒤주들 소소 최인 삼 제인 삼사 전에 문에 최대 마차와 제 단하되는 안에 이 교치 뭐 테마도 와대 땡대 차대요 봐 땡대 차대요 차대요 땡대 이마저 베나 가서 제 쉬이 봐 그래서 단다데 가서 셈 예외 제반에서 셈 예외 아니 개와 두바 이마이나 셈 예외네 제반 예외이나 랑게 되냐 두바도나 아니 생게 되다 가바 두도 그랬어 로다 가자 셈 예외네 아니 개와 두 대바이나 이 개와 되게 아니 가서다 저게 랑게 되 타바탑에 줄 타바 탑도 말했어 안 탐지 전마다 가바 탑도 그랬어 뭐 여봐 다 요
So, you know, we have kind of like from our own experience, I think plenty of understanding of what's being talked about here, whether we're engaged in the recitation of prayers or doing our commitments, engaging in meditation and so on, that it's like really how much of it is really, you know, quality Dharma practice. And that even though we may find ourselves on retreat or have a long time to do our different practices and so on, and really how much actual time is spent focused on what we're supposed to be doing on the Dharma. And you know, that it's important that we kind of have this understanding of that control of the mind is key. It's kind of that which underpins anything else that comes afterwards. And that if we don't do that, if we don't have that, then we can often be in a situation where we think we are engaged in spiritual practice, but in fact it doesn't even qualify as such at all, and that there's some doubt about that, you know. And so that if we are so distracted, then it's said in the text that if you are so distracted, then you won't accomplish your own purpose. So what need to mention accomplishing the purpose of others? If you are so distracted, then you won't attain the state of liberation. So what need to speak of the full and complete state of enlightenment? So therefore, you know, what do we gain from this? That we have to kind of say, you know, attention, really good quality attention is paramount. That you know, we cannot be negligent around this. There's no point in there kind of putting this on the back burner and saying, oh yeah, this doesn't apply to me. It's not important. We have to pay attention to this, and we have to kind of say, oh, I really need to be careful around what I'm doing in terms of if it's kind of come under the umbrella of Dharma practice. I have to be very careful with it. And when it comes to formal practice, we always favor quality over quantity. So even though you may not have a lot of time, make sure that it is every second counts.
가서 모두 장가 로야 말이야. 장가 가서 로야 있네. 장가 들레지 로네 가서 녀모 매바 차도 어쩌와니는 요 말이야. 다 녀모 매바 차야 돼. 아니 녀모라 갑대지는 녀부터는 녀모 아니 가서 녀모 깨기도 깨기문에 깨봐도 못쳐배 돈에 아니 가서 마 시와지에 아니 지금 숙처보이나 숙충도 충어도 매바 쏟다고 아니 녀모 그런 녀부터는 녀모 매바 쏟고를 봐도 아니 장가 먹고 자는 녀모 매바 차도 자원이네 매바 다 뒤면 뒤 못쳐배 돈에 오늘 아니 녀모 깨기도 깨기문도 아니 대 숙충도 그래서 당고도 깨봐이나 숙충도 그래서 당고도 뒤 매바 그래서도 아니 깨봐이나 깨당 그래서 깨기도 아니 깨당 그래서 깨도 못쳐배 돈에 아니 깨당 아니 깨디가 더 맞좀 봐봐이나 녀모 깨두고 말봐 what
So we must also be aware that counting is never going to eradicate mental affliction. So if we're in a process of counting of mantras or whatever we're doing, they are not going to eradicate mental affliction. Eradicating mental affliction relies on a clear and precise knowledge of your own mental afflictions, and applying the antidote each time that those mental afflictions arise, that we become accustomed to understanding why the mental afflictions arise. Therefore, we avoid certain cooperating conditions so that they don't. We are a keen observer of to what extent mental affliction has arisen, so that we can then apply the antidote. We deal with the more powerful mental afflictions in our psyche by aiming to reduce their influence, again by applying antidote. And we are absolutely clear that the only way to eradicate and reduce the influence of mental affliction is not through the accumulation of mantra or counting, but rather the application of the antidotes at the time of the mental affliction itself. So the second of these two outlines was a more extensive explanation of that point, and it has 4 subheadings. One is how we set out to protect the mind or guard the mind. Secondly, the reasoning why it is necessary to guard the mind. Thirdly, the benefits of guarding the mind. And fourthly, the kind of like generating this kind of like a spontaneous mindfulness in the process of guarding the mind. And so the first of these, how to go about guarding or protecting the mind, is verse number 19. Just as I would be attentive and careful of a wound when amidst a bustling, uncontrolled crowd, so I should always guard the wound of my mind when dwelling among harmful people.
ane baksun chigirwa sabsa chigirwa tel nojo mayo chedo sabsa chigirwa cheba shindo kibu nyeba nyomo kibe ken chebasa chone neban kasha lung lang chocho ane chig kasole ta kanja chig nyomo ke chocho ane shala chig tsik duja da kari ne pecho tang chocho tidu chele da tangbune chig sabsab chene tadi di ken chene nga nyomo kibe nyanga yore sabsab che gure kewe ken chebe chone neba kya semje mate tado sota soso semje mana shire nyomo ke chocho rwa nyomo ke chocho yinzi ken chungzho chige nyomo ke go yoba an hagdondo soso shida jawa yakwa mewa de ya soso dila magaba yinba yina ya mite dukja jego mare ya soso magawe gyumsen도 자 mite 제세가 dukja 통거래 계제시에 남주도에 강가 dukja 통거래 아니 된대게도 오다 지금 내 녀모께 내가 요래 삽사서 당번에 삽사체도 겨워서 마대 따도 송고서 셔봐보자.
And so this verse is talking about being in a situation where you're in a crowd and you have an injury or a wound, you know, something, a sore somewhere on your body that you are very, very aware of. And that you really say, oh gosh, I have to be very, very careful going through this crowd, lest somebody even brush up against it, which causes me great pain. And so you're kind of like walking with great care, conscientiousness, and so on through that crowd. And saying we should adopt this attitude to the wound of our mind when we are amongst the people as well. People who may be kind of rowdy, unruly, quick to anger, engaging in negative speech, etc. And so to again adopt that same level of care around what happens in your mind, because you have a kind of fragile, wounded mind there as well, that you don't want it to kind of that mind to brush it up against any negativity, because you are aware that even a tiny condition can set off a mental affliction in your mind. You know, even when you're going through a crowd like that, even just seeing somebody that you don't know can instantly generate a sense of dislike in your mind arising, you know, so that you can't even, you know, approve of anything that they are their appearance or what they're saying or how they're saying it and so on. And that you have to be conscious, very, very conscious of what's going on at all times to go, oh, that's a mental affliction. I want to be careful of this wounded mind, not to have it hurt in any way by my mental affliction in this situation.
초 내게와이네 내벨능에 페바주기 인삼 내벨랜데 페바주기 삼삼전 와다 간제 데레스가 페바당에다 아니 다가네 생게 저 다가네 생게 저 다간제 고두이네 제셰가 심전에 다간제 저 가서 고두이네 다가제 저 소소 셈데 아니 저 가서데 다가제 셈 란생게 생활 셈 뇽몽베 생활도 주되고 대도 아니 고두이네 뇽몽데 깨운거래 삼삼전 다 당분에 삼삼전 란데 가서데 거두이네 파주고 맞죠 소수라양 다가자 지금 뇽모 깨초적에 셈지 요바 인상 아니 파주고 깨초적 지금 소수 뇽모 깨고도 봐 난 당번에 소수 때네 삽사잖아 오다 이게 삽사지를 깨쳐버리면도 아니 뇽모 깨게 삼사전다 가자 대체가 소리에 깨쳐버려 수고요 다 어디래 다 거두이네 다 로아펜에 찾아는 거라서 그거 뒤고 요바 이네 party tang kibujen de yoba yine be ka ha wo jane yan sik pe ju ta nam ju ton da chi ge lam jang ma gi bo so gu do so de ga jana sem ge ma ge ji ge yor ba ta se ga so da ga je mo zo ta me we sem de be nyomo ke chu jo yor ba
Yeah, so that's really just when we talk about the cultivation of mindfulness and alertness, it's a 24/7 job that we can start off in the morning, very important, to kind of really set our motivation, particularly focusing on that if anybody harms me in today, I will automatically return benefit to them. And that's your bottom line. And that you can generate that in the morning, but to maintain it throughout the day, you need your mindfulness and alertness to be able to always kind of be ready to respond with benefit, regardless of what is coming your way. And that's understanding, the what's behind mindfulness and alertness. That you have to keep the mind under control, because as soon as the mind falls under the influence of mental affliction, there's great danger, and that you need to and really kind of like employ the habit of pointing inwards to your own state of mind. And mindfulness and alertness allow for this. They bring the attention back to what's going on internally, rather than pointing out to criticize or to blame in any other way. And also to just have an understanding that even tiny conditions can trigger afflictive emotions, and that therefore mindful alerters have to be aware of that. And that this is kind of like demonstrated when, even in a very happy situation you're in, maybe you're throwing a party and everybody is kind of like really living it up, but even one word in that context can bring can burst the bubble of that party and bring unhappiness. And so we have to be aware that mental affliction is always on the edge. It's always ready to arise, so easily triggered. And that you need, therefore, those guards of mindfulness and alertness to prevent that from blowing up, and being able to apply the antidotes in time.
我的多，俺俺大概这个身教出来以外，他Geshe langri thangpa songa langri thangpa ta lochong tsige pe na lo yuwa dire kasa tani semche thamche la yishin no wun lele donjo chupa sa tato chaba tsamba shu sen taga semche sula yimba ine yishin ke no wule ane tsa chewa tani ane guba cheye de ta shu kya chamba rangi guba da tsewa yuwa sa tila ane nyomong kya sa shira shuk changa re shira chung shuk la chukwa ane dende chana ane pe mutu nisa semche su tongwa ine ane che kaso de zewa de guze yue de sotowa ina ani ngoshi mashi gechama mare rangshenge ani je gaso de nyomong de shukchuma yongorwa ngozu kabe kabe pajo no ba keba sosu de magasuna lamje daga rane ani mite dukja shiu ani ko jeza ga dukja yimba sochi dukja yimba je kasana semje suine kol yende yore kyen yore 아니 된데레데 이내 랑게 마가서도 디 자자 야타바 끼면도 연대 자원이네 매게 소고도 와 삼 녀모 온거 소고도 와 아니 된데도 어디 교자 교 바시 통한데 아니 남장 녀모 께 추저 용고도 와 녀모 께 추저 용고다 다 되게 저 가서래 되게 그가 지금 로로 검지 검네 로종 그 책도 시부지게 받다 가자 가서 개 첨부 찌네 딱 하나도 냠신 난 거자 된 거라도 되는 거 열봐 된대지 맞지봐 된대지 제마도는 녀모께 그거 빼먹고 연구도 된대지 제도는 아니 녀모 딱 가서 저 가서 렐라보토네 딱 가서 저 가서도 도토에 연구 여봐 인사다 권하수 냠용되는 수고 여러 어디래
So we have to really start to or begin by raising our estimation of all the sentient beings, whoever they are, that they become more important in our eyes long before we even meet them. And that this is akin to what the great Geshe Tangpa did in his 8 verses of mind training. You know that verse where he says, we must see ourselves as less than the other and hold all sentient beings as even greater than a wish-fulfilling gem. And so if we can maintain that sense of respect and appreciation for all sentient beings automatically and universally, it will go to a great extent of to prevent mental afflictions, kind of overcoming that fine noble sentiment. And so it's very important that we try to do that, because we know that when we meet somebody for the first time and we don't get a good first impression, it can so easily then increase into disliking, and then of course then everything that they do is bad. It becomes like 100% bad. And this is now when you're being controlled by the mental affliction. And so you kind of like 100%, it's a negative from that point of view. And so it's kind of like really knowing that this is the way in which our minds are actually habituated. And so this is the kind of habit that you're up against. And so we need to understand that the mental afflictions can arise extremely easily. They arise readily. They will seek every opportunity to arise. And we must know this based on our own experience. And so this is why, for example, Langri Tangpa points to the fact that let us adopt the attitude of seeing all other sentient beings as greater than a wish-fulfilling gem, that they are already more important than us. They are greater than a wish-fulfilling gem. And that's our starting point. But we have to know the kind of habitual negative thinking that we're up against.
가서래 연대 하도한테 교연 통소는 너무 게임도 근데 연대 통소는 너무 게 수충하도 봐 다들 인바인도 연 당고 연대 통도 게치고 수리도 다 레르와 심제스인데 로아데 로아페나 가서데 먼저 산제다 장주 선바 짜침고 쉬우스거 장주 선바 짜침고 쉬우스 심제를 때는 장주 선바 차로 심제 매바이나 장주 선바 간데 송고래 로아 장주 심제 닝제라 용고래 닝제의 동에 나와 심제라 용고요래 동에 나와 심제 매네 닝제 요야 뭐 닝제 매네 장주 선바 요야 장주 선바 매바이나 산제 요야 요마데 아니 산제 매바이나 아니 단다 고속에 지 산제게 아니 탑 때문에 람디게도 용해요 말이 아니 다들 그가 배지 네가 심절할 때는 용되기도 저 심절을 질할 때는 용되기도 아니 말아도 소외도 시험 먹어 봤지.
So it's important for us to be realistic, that we know that we are all sentient beings are to some extent a mixture of darkness and light. But in terms of our response to sentient beings, we must focus on the good qualities, the light, initially. It's very important that we do that, because if we start with the faults, the darkness, then that colors everything about that person so quickly. So we always start off being ready to appreciate the good qualities of everyone. And that this is something that is kind of like underpinned by knowing the key importance of sentient beings in any spiritual path. That when we have such kind of respect and admiration for the Bodhisattvas, those who live by the mind of enlightenment, but we know that the mind of enlightenment arises through one of the main causes of it is the mind of compassion. This compassion, for its the quality and breadth of that compassion and depth of that compassion, is completely reliant on our observation of sentient beings, and that we know that you cannot attain the state of a bodhisattva unless you generate that compassion, and on the basis of that you generate the mind of enlightenment. You cannot attain the state of enlightenment unless you have the mind of enlightenment and complete that. And so Buddhas are also reliant on sentient beings, and they are absolutely crucial. And if we have no Buddhas, we have no one to show us the path. to enlightenment. So and when you look at it there, the place of sentient beings is in the kind of cycle of going from beginner to enlightenment is absolutely crucial and vital, and you cannot progress without the kindness of sentient beings. So again, this is kind of like raising the stature of sentient beings in our own minds, making it more ready, likely that we will see the good qualities of all sentient beings before we see their faults.
심지어 담자 이신 노블을 하와 지금 어느 소속에 녀바니 안디 똑바지 껴바이나 아니 랑게 녀모께 딱 국가 비슷한 자사도 어서 가사가 대 가사도 가사가 대 가대도 야고 삼았다 가사가 대 가der 디야고레 디루자레 세제테네 아니 가서데 가상월에 차바게 마가상월에 당하게 아니 근데 저는 다 노달랑데 대투요 노달랑데 근데 저는 가라서랑 근데밖에 가라서랑 테러리즘을 너밖에 다 대디가 아니 너도 지금 대화 두고 위해서 그러다 그래서 용투고래 용투에마다 다 심지어 담자 이신의 노블을 하가 지금 다 통도와 이나 뭐다 루아 당아서 다 통도와 이나 아니 최식의 상수고 저 뒤에 택받침에 최다 상수고 용도에 좀 살아是吧但这在军那了三届了古巴几个都是三届了马高几个都是他把他们这把主要了三届的三届你的你把两把人死아니 다디 가르쳐 놓으랬어 산제로 구바체 삼제로 마가와 제데 다 가르쳐 놓으랬어 송고도 와다디 오늘단에 야부 삼바다는 대바디 냐로다.
So to be able to really see all sentient beings as greater than a wish-fulfilling gem, I think is extremely important. If we can realize that, therefore bring it into our every interaction, that it in itself, stops all this judgmentalism straight away, and that none of this I like, I dislike, and we can see that also that if we have that kind of like a ultra critical aspect, then of this and that, of like and dislike, all the trouble that ensues from that is also bypassed, and that we can maintain our engagement in proper dharma in a natural way, automatically, spontaneously, just to have that attitude of really seeing all other sentient beings as greater than a wish-fulfilling gem. And so that is extremely important. Likewise, it talks in the Bodhisattva's way of life as well, that verse where it describes the way that we have such respect for the Buddha, and then we have no respect for sentient beings. And that Shantideva points out, when it comes to the attainment of liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment, both the Buddha and sentient beings are equally important in getting you there. And so therefore, this business of really admiring and adoring the Buddha, but not having any respect for sentient beings, what kind of spiritual tradition is that?
다 랍자래도 내가 요근을 랍자다 내가 요근도 내가 이봐도 워트베 돈에 아니 랑게 다 지가서 줄람납시깔라 아니 검기 잡도 지거다 도나 살나 통나 거두이나 아니 딜로라 차도가 제.
But that's a really key point, isn't it? That's a really key issue, and it's really necessary that we recognize it as something key, something really important, and therefore to adopt it into our behaviors automatically and absolutely consistently in whatever we do. We are recognizing that sentient beings are that important, and that we kind of live our lives accordingly. That's what makes a difference.
아니 되게 좋아요나 아니 심지어 술라인 바이네 페바투에다 아니 디토라 펜바 주위에다 펜도치야 구갑주나 아니 좋아기기로 와. 좋아. 베나딜라 지금 자지 피해 중화 구갑주나 좋아기기래. 클래스에 구갑주나 좋아기. 오, 당게 문에 전에 지금 도다 쳐보지 두고도 와서 좋아. 좋아. 다 근데 그 자할라 지금 아니 로바치 와서 그 아니 타바다 탐색팀에 유튜브 도와 정서로 와. 근데 그 심지어스 근데 베스 가서다 다 간제 싸침고 쉬우지. 지도가 있나?
So, like, when we see sentient beings, when we hold such sentient beings in such high regard as that, we have such appreciation for them, just by the fact that they're sentient beings, that is so important that, we can, when it comes to, being able to see sentient beings like that, then when there is an opportunity to be of benefit to them, then we can, take that opportunity with great relish. Really delighted to have the opportunity to be able to help them out some way, even if it's in a cup of tea or some food. We can actually really understand the situation here, really repaying the kindness of sentient beings, and may it be for all sentient beings, and so on. And so that simple act of providing a cup of tea or a little bit of food is increased in importance, and that's because not only are you just benefiting that person or those people immediately, but you're also getting closer to the state of liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment because of the motivation that you have with it.
소속의 대외의 칸디나 아니 제가 근데 칙토보다 칙직보다 근데 이미 개침보 말에 개침보 이미데 소소 셈데 아니 지금 장주의 셈다 대외 동리도에 셔라다 대외게 근데 그 대외 돈에 아니 가르쳐봐 대다 탐자 아니 지금 랑쇼게 타바다 탐제 김에 귤로 줘대기로 와
And so that's more important that saying a lot of prayers, placing a lot of emphasis on key words and so on, is to really have this control of the mind, to conduct our lives and all the incidents of our lives with the fusion of that mind of enlightenment with emptiness, the mind realizing emptiness as much as we possibly can, because that's laying down the causes for us to attain liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment.
원래서 다 니바 순고베 좀 전에 자왈래 마이 동에 충고에 작방 마이 박제나 된조 작바다 셈제마다 짐이 송샤.
So the second of these points of the more extensive explanation is the reasoning why it is necessary to protect the mind. Verse number 20 says, "And if I am careful of a wound through fear of it being slightly hurt, then why do I not guard the wound of my mind through fear of being crushed by the mountains of hell?"
我的这大概这个这大概是这说论了马着我的论了这个的马着我的교차 주요 봐 있나 아니 디 가리 투바 있네야 아니说这个马的了差呢说但这拿着大家刚才这个有吧인자 동에 다 지단 잡아 있나 지금送个동에 지단 동에 충조 줄 봐. 이내 동에 충고에 대들래 아니 지금 미서 봐 잡아겠네. 바제 고고이나 뒤 가서 뒤를 순접 제게 하는 거죠. 지금 제고고이나 아니 지금 녀송 거 동에 로다 찬에 둔좀게 리보치 못하고 좀에 동에 제 잡아디 동에 계제게 딕동소 셈제마다 치면서 스텝데 다 같이 되게 셈데 다 녀몽 깨네 다루와 녀몽 깨네 아니 지가서다 다데 냐와 둔졸라세 소베가 동에 녀에 주주바데 연구로 왔다 다 되네 임바에서 아니 되게 마데다 가르쳐 송고고 말에 송고고로 왔어 동에 충종은 지금 내가 그 동에 지는 것도 순접되는 지구 여바이나 아니 동에 지금 충분히와 주 주인인가 여기 이게 생게 마데다 가르쳐 송고고 말했어 뭐라
And so this verse speaks of then the way in which we are, very careful of if we have some sort of a cut or a wound in our own body, which causes a little suffering. And yet, through fear of it being hurt, we are very careful of that wound. And yet, we are less so when it comes to the protecting the wound of the mind from creating the mental afflictions that send us to the lower realms, such as the particular hot hell called the crushing hell, where we can get thrust between two great mountains, and the massive suffering that causes. Why aren't we so afraid of that? And so we have to, I kind of say, why wouldn't we protect our minds from the negativities and downfalls that give rise to that kind of suffering? We must do so. The reasoning is very obvious, that we do whatever we can to protect ourselves from entering into the lower realms, and that particularly the mental afflictions that give rise to the hell realms and so on. We must protect ourselves from that. So if we protect ourselves from the possibility of minor suffering because we have some injury on the body, then why don't we protect ourselves from much greater suffering, as explained here?
What the nigga that the pressure they now because of the job so good what the job so that's hanya richard wa kasna chikasola ta kanja dele kegen subject get that now what to get the to me part to be nyon ani be ritamje ta be so so ge ani chege because of the ke lesson that subject ben ta kanja chikasola ta kanja langola so barala so lula so ta kanja subject ka say na the send that kaso de ta nyomo to so shushim ko de sen kata chikasa sen ta de tigasa tigada maja ta de ke to ani me ke de o ani rida dige de ka simjen de ta ge ra go ta de ge namba to na ani be ridi para sin tunga pa to ta so se leg on go ta de tunga pa to me ba nyon de de yong go serva ta de ge sai de shaba ji ge sa ma so so ge sa so so ge ta le de sa de ta yong go yor ba ta de sa de ge le sa ye ge let saege and sing mate sunjob jema to bache and let sa to and de ke wa de le to yora de yinza ta dige de mate sunye karche ni ge chmo mares lule tunga chungjo je nyoye le mo sunjob ju je go to and de de nyezo go tunga pa do me ba nyoye de pe je de tungdo ma ba pe gyur pe lo pa ja da shida gyur mo ta lo gyur mo shu de what the dunga pato me ba nyoe tendela ta karche no sunjo chegu mares ma di karche sungu mares what the sungu yoro hotel.
So these hells, in this particular case, the gathering and crushing hell within the hot hells, the scenario is that if the person has been in the process of killing a lot of sentient beings, particularly those horned beings like goats and buffalo, and etc., that what happens is, due to a karmic appearance, when you're in that hell, you are like just shoveled together into this great mass of life. And then these two mountains, with the head of the mountains is shaped like the horns of these animals, and they come together and just crash and crush into tiny pieces, and all those who are caught between. And that saying this is all due to your own karma that you yourself have created, and it creates this karmic appearance in this particular hell realm. And that and so that is because of a non-disciplined mind. This is no control over the mind. And so, why wouldn't you protect yourself from this kind of harm when you are so careful about even protecting yourself when you have a small injury or a small wound? And also in terms of the time too, when you are caught in that particular hell realm, you're there for a long time.
ngazo gyusade pe na kibu chen sade ge do pe ba me chen gyusade ge pe na cha cha na wo de da nyasim ga don de ga che ge sports or chen de do ta pe nyasim pe ji so pe kibu yin sam da de ge yor ba ta kibu tang ge sam sam chen ne ani de ba sa go do ba ka zna de ge 다 몽베 옹게 기디기 내주게 신게 요 말봐 마신베 옹게 아니 된 이제 아니다 시가소데 레사 레사 저도다 sem게 마데 송마도 바 인사 아니 되게다 레사잖아 동네 봐도 매봐 주도 오고 바타 닌제 다들 제스트 되고 또 마신 몽베 옹게 또 몽바 마리베 옹게 다 레사기도 왔고 되래 다들
So, you know, that the causes that give rise to this kind of rebirth as being described here are accumulated so readily, so unknowingly in many cases. You know, when we speak about fishing, for example, where, you know, it's so much promoted as a leisure activity, yet you go on your holidays and you catch big fish and you're delighted for what you've caught. And showing off your catch, etc. You accumulated a similar kind of causes on your mind stream at that time, through ignorance, through just this profound ignorance, and that can give rise to that kind of rebirth, and how sad that is.
What is your word? 가지고다 what 당가라 주게 되네 다 되네 남매 온게 다 남매 마시베 온게 아니 레사잖아 저거 봐도 매번 요 대체 다 되네 이번 인사 아니 기디게 랑도 라 몽바스 몽바 다 가서다 다 몽바디 아니 시와체 당가서 추글 롭주 제서 들어 봐 추글 롭주 제다 근데질 개와 연구도 근데질 디과 연구도 아니 되네 그 랑도가 내주 시에도 철 저선 부서 지금 열 봐. 지금 열봐 왔다 되네 이번 인사 되네 다 되네 이번 당 지금 가서래 당 간자 저 녀모 마게 다 간데스 제고도 버터와 다 인자 디 가서래 다 지금 레냐 바자 사이나 아니 델라 제바 델라 가서 남이게 되고 제바 준데 녀와 준데 단델라서 봐 코베 지금 15주 못une 동네 빠도 매바 용하지 못une 코알네 게 아니 가서도 다 같이 지금 가서도 다 지금 방아지 뒤온 것도 와. 다 이거 지금 가서 삼을 약고 땅에 개침버려도 와.
And so that you know, we can't really ignore the fact that this is relating to us as well. How many such karmas have we accumulated, like inattentively, unknowingly, even not paying any attention. Due to this kind of confused ignorance. And after all, this is why in many ways we study the Dharma, that we know the causes that give rise to happiness, the causes that give rise to suffering, and we need to become very, very astute with regard to these particular causes, and to understand how it is that we can avoid mental affliction arising. You know, all of this is all part of our key, vital training, our education, to avoid having to experience these kind of ripening results, or even the results in harmony with the cause, or environmental results, even related to all these causes.
다 진짜 미시베 온게 지금 여러다 벤차잖아 우리 지금 니저 파마소에나 소소 부고를 자와 메가 수가요 말에 얘네다 아니 소소를 자와 메가 수가요 말 소소 동해 용에 지도 수인에 지금 말봐 얘네 마시 몽베 온게 아니 지금 가서다 베나 지금 가서래 냐심다 되네전 지금 뭐 봐도 뭐 사대 용도 안 되자 메레 소소 치마베도 소소 부고다 그tin 로도 니제 근데 다 못네 되네 디바사에 이제 랑가도 땡도 우리 저 밤에 부고를 팬도 저 내게다 그네치 얘네다 마시베 오게 몽베 온게 지금 열어줘 되네 인사 마시바데 야 디바 용에 그 고지로 와 마시바데 되네 이마자 모두 추글롭네 저 마시바 매버서에 지도 추글롭네 지금 열어
So that we see this not knowing around everywhere in relation to parents in the way that they kind of treat their children, that they can have great love for their children, but because they like fishing, they want to bring their children in on the act as well, to give them that chance, to enjoy the thrill of catching a fish, and so they bring their children out to fish as well, and it's all this complete not knowing, and that entering into this in kind of like under the guise of loving, but you are leading them into creating such negativities. And so that this is of course why we engage in spiritual education, to kind of eradicate this unknowing, and to know that these harmful acts are not just on the being that is being destroyed, but it is in a way destroying ourselves.
Today is a Mishiba the Yabachu Quache, Yang Rangi, what I thought Maguba the Yabachu Quache, Yang Bame Bachen, Single Yavana Bame Shoyina, Temple the Sisi Masiba and Bame Shoy, Yan Yabachu Quache, Yan Yomo Shuksubayina, Yang Gasa the Yabachu Quache. That is a what to get the Hakoba Chen, Mishiba de Shibasu, Maguba de and Guba Cheche. And
so as it says, these 4 doorways through which we accumulate mental afflictions, the negativities are allowing through which mental afflictions kind of get through to us, through this not knowing, that's been explained, but also having a disrespect, even though we understand what is right and wrong. And then there's the lack of conscientiousness, a kind of a careless, casual attitude, that we don't close that particular doorway. And then the 4th is where the mental affliction is particularly powerful. It squeezes through our defenses anyway. And that so, we have to kind of take up arms, really, in a way, to counteract all 4 of these, to, in a way, close the 4 doorways to mental affliction as much as we can by informing ourselves to eradicate the not knowing, by generating respect where we have disrespect, by employing, mindfulness and alertness to counteract the lack of conscientiousness, and by reducing the power of powerful mental afflictions. The 3rd of these points is the point regarding the benefits of guarding the mind. Verse number 21 speaks of this. Should I behave in such a way as this, then whether among harmful people or even in the midst of women, the steady effort to control myself will not decline. Again, I was pointing out that 3rd line there, even in the midst of women, of course, is because these verses were initially written for those who are fully ordained monks. So we should say, even in the midst of men and women in that regard. It's not exclusively women here.
Because this subject, West country very sensitive.
Let's say if we're not careful with regard to giving a little extra explanation in these verses, we know that women in Western countries are very sensitive to these issues. Yeah, but actually the meaning is the same. It's what it's saying here, even in the midst of both men and women. And indeed, yeah, when it comes to attachment, there's no distinction made between men and women, that both can have very powerful attachments.
다 녀몽 건네배서 소소고 녀몽 아니 가서 준토게 녀몽 샤완도 마다 녀몽 건네배 줘봐 된다 다도 never 제다 다도 never 제다 다 니셔 저도 조상 거저지나 다도 never 제나 아니 콘도적이 기본이 배 트나서 야 콘도적이 기본이 배 트는 never나 랑 콘도되게 게 맞잖아 랑 녀몽 게 맞잖아 게 맞아 걸어 니지 게 되고 봐 다가 이제 되자적이 개바이나 비메이나 근데 저 내바이네 좀 내용 좀 저저 좀센 템베 템바되게 냐바 주고 말았어 미쳐 셔봐 오차.
So it's saying here the benefits are that when we have this tight control over mental afflictions, that it's kind of like really we keep any negative behavior firmly under kind of wraps, and that this when we're able to stay in that state of mind, then regardless of what kind of company we keep, even if we're amongst those who are very aggressive and angry, that we aren't affected by that, or those who are very desirous, have a lot of attachment and so on, that we are not affected by that either. And that we have this steady effort of restraining our mental attitude, and that that prevents our behavior from deteriorating or degenerating.
And the ran no more shawado majona and condo chela ya and ran condo kejo sabla condo chela and because of the niji ke chungurwa. That condo shawado joy na that to get the yobudo sana and the condo with gyan tone and kansa the niji ke chungurwa. Tagani ran no more shawado majona and the chake and gyan tone and the judging kansala niji ke chungurwa. Yongurwa. That di maje do and condo kesala raya condo kene magi bachen dede no mo ken ani to cha raya di to cha ge shangwa de chine dede jungurwa so ta dini niga de kasa ra dini niga nyomo ge shangwa do maju wa yina di nyomo lam de di gende lam de ke du do ra nyomo ge shangwa de jona ani lam de ke du mo do lam de ke du mo do what did it.
And so the stark contrast here between whether or not we bring a controlled mind into either of these situations is very stark. That if we go into the first scenario where people are aggressive, irritated, angry, and we face somebody being angry and we don't have any control, then we are going to generate anger in response to that. We're in the other situation where desire is very paramount, that we're faced with somebody very desirous, then we're going to engage in and generate desire and kind of copy match that mental affliction. This is the way mental affliction works. But in this verse, in this scenario, we have control over the mind. And so this becomes not just a case of avoiding mental affliction, but it's much more proactive than that. That when we're in the first scenario faced with anger, we can actually, because we have control over the mind, we not only avoid the mental affliction of anger, but also we respond with compassion. We understand the whole scenario, the whole situation here. So we respond with compassion. When we're in the second scenario, faced with a desire attachment, that again, we respond with compassion in that situation. And so with control of the mind, it not only protects us from danger, but we can take those dangerous situations onto the path and develop compassion in response. Let's leave it there for today.
Yeah, and it. That no can put the Geshe shero chiquito.
Rangi, I'm sure cookie do get like Rangi. Get to do. Get to shake him into, pa, ma.
Tapchi
Yeah, Tapchi check it right, and a Korangi compact gap and near go with what. Yeah.
Oh, the bear. All of that. Garatu Tata Tundela. Labatua was said about it. That rangit. That comes from quality and to make Ranshi, but any dele. That to make Ranshi the quality never to Nijuji Samata, never to Nijuji Samata, and the day Nijung Lotini, Rangi Chivola Pamata Makavach Tuso, some such. And then the Caso de Tachinang Chuk condition, you tend to what do your money, some up. You tend to remember Jumzaka Lesanaco, because then the tap was, then the tap some was, then the thousand you did to what it do, your supper, your money. What I did, what the nigga Kachakazam de some doors done energy, and you make what Yakan watch to the pyramid. And then some jet come to Sanyo Command, you want the mother to Tobachiki, some such logic. The nigga do but it, and the Tariki Bokas and Yakan watch to some such. Then Pandia Lama to Bocha, Tariki Pemitation, Kajichi, Puzo to Jamuto Chato, so the Chavalatene, and the Tambu Caso, Lama to be over the Yogarasi and the Chibola. Peso, something, never comes to shoot, Subako to Tedushan, Sandia Kubamato, but the chairs for something.
So we begin our dissolution process, and that's again focusing on the central figure in the space in front of us. We start the process of setting up a suitable seating arrangement on our own crown by reflecting on renunciation, the fact of the cyclic existence, being in the nature of suffering, how we must gain definite emergence from that state of suffering. From that mind state arises the lotus mandala disc, and that then through reflecting on this self, wishing to attain that state of liberation, being lacking any objective existence, merely being imputed by thought, and maintaining a focus on that just mere negation of the object of negation. And from that arises the sun disk analysis. And then reflecting on this mind of enlightenment, of wishing to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, just that notion itself producing the moon disk analysis. And thereafter we recite the invocation verse thrice, so glorious and precious root Guru, come take your lotus and moon disk placed here at my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the end of the first recitation, the figure moves from the space in front towards our crown. At the end of the second, they have arrived and are seated there. At the end of the third, we have certainty that they will remain until we attain the state of enlightenment, and we rejoice in that fact. And then following our rejoicing in their the certainty of their remaining until we attain the state of enlightenment ourselves, we offer the 7 limbs of practice and the mandala offering.
두가 홀레든 아니 이거는 사베티고 다소 섭섭죠. 어디서 아니 송가래 아니 뒤에 번에 아니 바자들 바장수 어디게 고바셰토나 야구요래 어디서
And if we have the time, it's very good here to do the descending nectar-like meditation or visualization, employing the hung at the Buddha's crown, throat, and heart, respectively, with the light rays emanating from the at the crown, entering into your crown, and purifying all the negativities and obscurations associated with your physical negativities, those engaged with the body. And that then from the throat, the light rays emanating who deal with all the negativities that we have done through our speech, and the light rays coming from the heart center, there, that syllable home, dealing with all the negativities that we have accumulated mentally.
어디로 공부하셔 어디로죠 아니 되네 가서 되네요 양조 공부하시네 아니 저 코아 감수가 코아 탐자나 동네가 다시 뭐 때네 아니 텔레 타와지 맞은 좀 도전은 여가지고 좀 공부하시네 아니 랑니 대표마 답제를 교수 섬자자 아니 지금 섬제 탐제도 산제 공부 중에 생각이 가마도 제죠 나 많이 갔다가란 걸 셈샤네 아니 뭐다데 되게 가서 가자 가서 어디 내가 셈잖네 아니 된대기 가서다 나라시가 맞고 내배 로다가라 아니 니메기 뭐다 약하고 주소 선자들 심지어 탐제도 산제 고만 요원도 맞아서 지금부터 토바치기 서로 로직겠네 아니 데이터이지 뭐 약하고죠 아니 가서다 니메대도 호텔 쉬어서 공부하셔 되네 반대자를 라마도 뭐지 다게 닝가 빼면 되실라 가지고 고수도 좀 뭐저 자도서 안데서도 제가 담배 값소 담배 집어내 마주네 담배 가서 니베 가서 쇼스베 때도시나 산제 고마마도 그때 제수 선선 공부하셔 아니 되네 닝 빼면 되게 카이다서 되는 도저히 그거 장하고 쳐봐지 할게 아니 되네 타고도 좀 내가 다에도 뭐는 마음에 소아스 되네 지금 잠에 무슨 오마라 바자나 디디도 오마라 바자나 디디디디디디디스 아니 되네 때는 거 예다마 예도도 뭐 샤만라에서 되네 이게 숨고가 숨고 거되겠어 어떤지 고마시
And then we again start to produce the suitable seating arrangement at our own heart center to kind of invite the Buddha from our crown down to our heart center. Here again, contemplating on renunciation, how cyclic existence, being in the nature of suffering, how wonderful it would be to be free from that, to attain a liberation from that, definite emergence from that mind state itself. Arises the lotus mandala seat. That's a place at our heart. And then we have this sense of this I wanting to attain that liberation. Where is that self? Where is that I? And searching through the body-mind continuum, reaching the point at which we don't find such an objectively inherently existent I or self. We merely pause at that mere negation of the object of negation. And from that mind state, the sun-dust mandala seat arises. And then thinking of how to really help all sentient beings perfectly, we need to attain that state of enlightenment, generating that bodhicitta attitude, that mind of enlightenment, and from that, the moon disk mandala seat. So we're all prepared. We utter the invocation verse again thrice. So glorious and precious Rupu, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the end of the first recitation, the figure moves down from the crown down through the central channel, and then with the second, at the end of the second, arrives at our pre-prepared seat. And at the end of the third, they remain there steadfast until we ourselves attain the state of enlightenment. And then the petals of the lotus fold over and are sealed at the tips by a 5-pronged white semivajra. and the petals are surrounded by the three mantras, the mantra of the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha in a clockwise direction, the mantra of Manjushri in an anti-clockwise direction, and the mantra of dependent origination in a clockwise direction. And then, light rays emanate from the Guru Manindra within, permeating through the petals, permeating through every cell of our bodies, from the crown of the head to the soles of the feet, and purifying all negativities and obscurations that we have accumulated since beginning of time. Although those negativities associated with the 10 non-virtues of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, of lying and harsh speech, divisive speech, idle gossip, of covetousness and malicious intent and wrongdoing. All those accumulated in this life, in the previous life, in the previous life to that, in the previous life to that, going right back to beginning of time, they are all purified. That all the negativities associated with the downfalls and infractions of the Pratimoksha vows, of the Bodhisattva vows, of the Tantric vows, all negativities relating to a lack of respect that we've had from our parents or to our gurus, that negativities that we have engaged in ourselves, that we have induced others to do, and which we have rejoiced in others doing, all those negativities completely and utterly purified.
And 중시 거의 많이 봐. 살롱 틸레 견 컨디션 봐 장치 다소 삼사. 뭐 장치 다소 어떻게 공부하셔? 아니 학교도 뉴도 산지에 공부 토발라 탐에게 나셔. 견 지시 이번에서 탐에게 나셔. 견 탐제다 가나다에 다바를 좀 바시 차도가 양시 총수서. 근데 여기서 딱 소소 신도 제가 놓는 일행이죠. 라마샤자스의 꾸들 현지 지간전 소소도 라마샤자스의 꾸를 주소 소소 신도서를 섬되는 내지 라마샤자스의 투들 현지 소소 섬되 라마샤자스의 투를 주소 랑게 룽아이서 라마샤자스 꾸주동 예매 주소 대 대화대 대도니 섬의 이시게 소소 공부자 랑게 내사게 내대 내의 견 탐자전의 라마샤자스의 당부시도 주소 소소 공부자.
And then all of the inconducive situations or conditions to our practice, such as the illness of the body, any kind of illness or disease, sickness, and also illness of the mind, things that can prevent us from engaging in a spiritual practice, that all of the imbalances of our channels, winds and drops of the elements within the body, that these are all, balanced again, rebalanced. So we have like all the conducive conditions to be able to engage in really perfect quality practice. And that in particular, this is that which really prevents us from making quick progress towards enlightenment, that is being bound by this ordinary appearance, that is kind of transformed into our being able to see everything in its pure appearance. We then through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the substantial cause, together with the body of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of a Buddha. And then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, together with the mind of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, and my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of a Buddha. Now I see my body, speech, and mind as being inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. This is something that is so wonderful. I kind of completely rejoice in this. Bliss arises, which combines with voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness. Likewise, the place that I am in is transformed of all fault and is transformed into the palatial abode of an enlightened being.
Ane degi tugale simjega dada wese chowal tene, wese deda tanja simjega rara sosolo poala tene, deda tanja ya lama shaja singa kusu tungo yime kyusu. Deda nesa ne deda tanja nyo gyon tanja chene lama shaja singa taba shido kyusu. Da kamso simjega tanja lama shaja singa wata sala kuya tuso, da yago shivu chungsu. Ne simjega tamjega tanja sanje kuma chugu isa, da je chungna simjega tanja sanje sala kuya tuso kawa kuya. Da simjega tanja sanje sala kuwa, de dupe che de susu kiawa kar sama, de dupe susu de shivu, yu den de dupa du sam mea kude, di dewa de, dewe tongba de, de donye su me shi, de su su su. Dada mewa ije samre, dadi mune kura de de yuwa yu de dupe ke, tun jen tsang, ge jen de dewe gyuru gyuwa shu, so kwa che.
And then seeing myself as lacking any inherent existence. I, from my heart center, as a fully enlightened being, send out light rays equal in number to all the sentient beings in all the realms of existence. As these light rays touch those sentient beings, they immediately arise as spontaneously as fully enlightened beings. And all their abodes also transformed of all fault, and transformed into the palatial abodes of an enlightened being. And that this is something I immediately rejoice in, how wonderful I have accomplished this goal of leading all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment. I also understand that this process by which sentient beings have been led to the state of enlightenment, the virtue that has enabled that, myself as the agent of that virtue, we all lack any kind of inherent existence and are merely computed by thought. This thought in itself brings forth a sense of bliss in the mind, which combines with voidness, and I abide in the non-dual wisdom of non-dual bliss and avoidance. So I realize that all of what I produced here mentally, visualization, is completely part of a job of the imagination. This doesn't, we can't accomplish this so easily. This is all part of the imagination, but I certainly make it a sincere dedication that this will all occur for real, very, very quickly. That all the conducive conditions will come together and all the inconducive conditions will be banished, and so that I can really speed towards enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings. You are Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of compassion, not ended through existence, and Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception, Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows, Losang Drakpa, at your feet and make requests.
Okay.